They say even the gods know the pain of falling. Ix Chel, the Mayan goddess of the moon and waters, was cast from the sky like a wounded star, and, in the deep silence of a cenote, was reborn more powerful than ever. But what happened before this fall? And what secret did she bring from the depths to change not only the fate of the gods, but also of mortals? This is a legend of love and confrontation, of light and shadow, of destruction and rebirth. If this story piques your curiosity, leave a like and follow me until the end, because the mystery is just beginning. Hello, I'm Kaya, the legend teller, and today I'm going to tell you a story that originated deep in the Mayan civilization, among stone temples and lost jungle cities. A legend about Ix Chel, the goddess the Mayans called the white-skinned one or Lady of the Rainbow. Over 1,000 years ago, when the Mayan pyramids still echoed with sacred chants and the scent of copal perfumed the skies of Yucatán, there existed a goddess whose power was as vast as the cycles of life themselves. Ix Chel was not just one deity among many. She was the very beating heart of feminine existence, the guardian of nature's deepest mysteries. Imagine for a moment the ancient Mayan cities, Palenque, Tikal, Chichen Itza. In those times, when the sun set behind the pyramids and night embraced the jungle with its myriad mysterious sounds, it was Ix Chel who emerged in the sky. Its silvery light bathed the limestone temples, glided through the waters of the sacred cenotes, and illuminated the faces of the women weaving in the courtyards of the adobe houses. The Maya saw her in many forms. Sometimes she appeared as a radiantly beautiful young woman with hair as black as the night and eyes that shone like liquid silver reflected on the surface of lakes. On these nights, when she appeared in her youthful form, Ix Chel walked through the dreams of young women about to be married, whispering secrets of love and fertility, teaching them the secret rhythms of life as it blossoms and blossoms. But she could also manifest as a wise old woman, bent by the weight of centuries, with serpents entwined in her silver hair and eyes that held all the wisdom of time. In her wrinkled hands, she held medicinal plants, spider webs shining like jewels, and small clay pots that dripped crystal clear water onto the parched earth. When she appeared like this, healers and midwives knew it was time to gather the most powerful herbs, for Ix Chel was pouring her medicine upon the world. It was she who presided over childbirth, whispering courage into the ears of the women who brought new life into the world. It was she who taught the weavers how to weave cotton into fabrics that seemed to trap the very light of the moon. And it was she, above all, who ruled the waters, from the rain that fell from the heavens to the rivers that wound through the jungle, bringing life to every corner of the Mayan land. The priests said that Ix Chel was born from the primordial waters themselves, when the world was still young and the gods walked freely among mortals. They said she emerged from the depths of the sacred cenotes, those natural wells that the Maya considered portals to the underworld, bringing with her all the secrets of cyclical life. Her name echoed in full moon rituals, when women gathered in temple courtyards, carrying offerings of white flowers, wild honey, and cloth embroidered with gold thread. They sang to Ix Chel in voices that mingled with the nocturnal chorus of crickets and frogs, asking for her protection for the wombs that bore life, for the hands that wove daily life, for the hearts that loved intensely. And then there was Itzamna. Itzamna, the great lord of the heavens, the creator god who taught mankind the art of writing, the cultivation of corn, and the mysteries of the sacred calendar. He was portrayed as a kindly old man with a rounded nose and eyes full of wisdom, always wearing a hat adorned with colorful flowers. Itzamna was the sun in its most benevolent form, the god who brought light, knowledge, and order to the world. Among all the deities of the Mayan pantheon, there was no union more powerful or more complex than theirs. Ix Chel and Itzamna, moon and sun, feminine and masculine, water and fire, intuition and reason. Together they had created the world as the Mayans knew it, and from their union were born 13 divine children, including the gods of corn, plants, cacao, and the stars that shone in the celestial vault. But even in the divine realms, where eternity flows like golden honey and time has other meanings, there were tensions and contradictions that mirrored the very conflicts of human experience. The passion between Ix Chel and Itzamna was like nature itself, intense, transformative, and sometimes devastating. When they loved, the world flourished. The rains fell in their own measure, the corn grew golden in the fields, and even the stones of the temples seemed to pulse with life. But when they disagreed, the skies darkened with raging storms, the rivers overflowed their banks, and the very fabric of reality seemed to tremble. Itzamna was the sun in all its glory, and also in all its stubbornness. His light was generous, but it could become relentless. He had the stubbornness of a fire that refuses to be extinguished, the intensity of someone who saw the world come into being and believed he knew exactly how it should function. When Itzamna decided on something, he expected the entire universe, including Ix Chel, to bow to his will. Ix Chel, in turn, was like the waters, adaptable when she wanted to be, but untamable when pressed. She could be the gentle rain that nourishes, but also the storm that sweeps away entire mountains. She was not a goddess who took orders, even from the one she loved. Her power flowed in its own cycles, obeying rhythms that not even Itzamna could fully decipher. And it was precisely this fundamental difference that planted the seeds of the most terrible conflict the Mayan sky had ever seen. It is said that the tension began in a seemingly simple way. Itzamna, in his solar wisdom, had established that all creatures in the world should follow fixed and predictable patterns. The day should last exactly the same length. The seasons should alternate without variation. And even human hearts should love and suffer within limits he deemed appropriate. But Ix Chel could not accept this rigidity. For her, true life pulsed in change, in the unexpected, in cycles that sometimes lengthened and sometimes shortened according to the deepest needs of existence. How could she, mistress of the tides, accept that the sea was always the same? How could she, guardian of births, allow each birth to follow an inflexible schedule? The world needs order, Itzamna said, his voice echoing like thunder through the clouds. It needs rules that don't change, so that mortals can plan their lives, plant their seeds, build their cities. And I say the world needs life, Ix Chel replied, her words flowing like running water over stones. And true life doesn't fit into molds. It overflows, transforms, finds paths neither you nor I can foresee. This argument continued night after night, until the stars themselves seemed to choose sides. Some shone brighter when Itzamna spoke. Others blinked in approval when Ix Chel argued her point. The mortals below began to notice something changing in the sky. The rains came at odd times. The moon appeared in different phases than expected. The sun sometimes shone with an intensity that scorched the leaves of the trees, as if angered by something only the gods could understand. The tension grew like a storm slowly gathering on the horizon. And then, on a night when the moon was particularly bright and defiant, what had to happen, happened. Ix Chel had decided to help a young Mayan woman who was having difficulty giving birth. The girl, no more than 16, had been in labor for 2 days, and the midwives were already fearing for her life and the babies. Ix Chel, moved by the compassion that always defined her actions, descended from the heavens in the form of an old healer with luminous eyes. With her divine hands, she massaged the young woman's womb with sacred oils, whispered healing chants in her ear, and did what she always did, altered natural rhythms to save 2 lives. The labor that should have lasted hours was shortened, and both mother and baby survived. healthy and strong. But when Ix Chel returned to the sky, Itzamna was waiting for him, and in his solar eyes shone a fury that made the very air shimmer with heat. "You've changed the rules again." His voice echoed like a roar that made all the stars tremble. "How many times must I remind you that interfering with established destinies has consequences for the entire cosmos?" "And how many times must I remind you?" Ix Chel replied, her voice liquid but firm as the current of a river in flood. "That true love obeys no rules, that compassion is more important than order." "Your compassion is weakness," Itzamna shouted, and his light intensified until it was almost unbearable. "And your disobedience is chaos." "And your control is death," Ix Chel countered, shrouding herself in silver veils that resembled dances of mist. "A world without change is a world without a soul." What happened next echoed throughout the celestial vault like a thunderous roar that shattered mountains. Itzamna, blinded by rage and wounded pride, raised his right hand, and from it burst forth a beam of sunlight so intense that it cut through the night like a golden blade. The lightning struck Ix Chel squarely, and for the first time in the entire history of the Mayan cosmos, the moon goddess screamed in pain. Ix Chel's cry pierced not only the heavens, but the deepest dimensions of Mayan reality. It was a sound the ancient priests described as the lament of every woman who had ever lost a loved one, mingled with the roar of every river that had ever dried up, amplified by the echo of every dream that had ever shattered against the harshness of the world. Struck by Itzamna's solar ray, Ix Chel was flung from the sky like a silver shooting star. Her divine body sliced through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of light that flickered between gold and silver, as if the sky itself were crying tears that couldn't decide whether they were of fire or water. She fell. It fell through layers of cloud that crumbled at its touch. It fell past the sacred sites where the Mayans built their tallest pyramids in an attempt to touch the gods. It fell past the canopies of the giant cecropia trees that crowned the jungle, and finally, it crashed into the earth with an impact that shook all the deep roots of the Yucatán Peninsula. The place where she fell, the elders say, instantly transformed into a cenote of crystal clear waters, so deep that not even the bravest divers could find its bottom. And in these waters, Ix Chel lay submerged, unconscious, her wounded divine body floating amidst rays of silvery light that still pulsed faintly, like a heart struggling to keep beating. Up above, Itzamna remained in the sky, but her victory tasted of ashes. The silence that followed Ix Chel's disappearance was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of death, a void that echoed where once there had been the luminous dance of the dialogue between sun and moon, between masculine and feminine, between order and fluidity. And that's when the consequences began to manifest. First, there were the waters. Without Ix Chel to govern the water cycles, the rivers began to lose their rhythm. Some dried up completely, their banks cracking like open wounds in the earth's skin. Others overflowed uncontrollably, sweeping away entire homes and crops that had taken months to grow. The rain stopped following the seasons, falling in devastating torrents or simply disappearing for months at a time. Mayan women were the first to feel the goddess's absence. Childbirth became more difficult, longer, and more dangerous. Many women who once gave birth easily now suffered for days, as if their bodies had forgotten the ancient rhythms that Ix Chel had taught the world's first mother. The midwives burned incense and sang traditional chants, but their words seemed lost in the air, unable to find the divinity that had always heard them. The weavers also felt the emptiness. Their hands, once so skilled at creating patterns that mimicked the moon's dance among the stars, now produced only soulless fabrics, devoid of the subtle inspiration that came from the dreams Ix Chel used to send during full moon nights. The colors lost their luster, as if an invisible veil had been drawn over all the beautiful things in the world. But perhaps most terrible of all was what happened to human hearts. Without the cyclical influence of Ix Chel, its rhythms of growth and retreat, of fullness and emptiness, of surrender and renewal, people began to feel a strange weight on their chests. It was as if something fundamental had disappeared from the world, leaving a hole they could neither name nor fill. Young men lost the desire to court their beloveds. Artists stopped creating. Farmers planted their seeds, but without the anticipation that once made their eyes sparkle. It was as if the entire Yucatán Peninsula was shrouded in an invisible fog that sucked the hope out of things before they could even blossom. The priests gathered at the main temples, Palenque, Tikal, Copan, trying to understand what had happened. They watched the night sky and saw only Itzamna alone, shining with a light that seemed dimmer than before, as if even the great sun god had lost some of his strength, because in truth, I had lost. Itzamna discovered too late that her light only shone fully when she had something to illuminate that was worthy of her luminosity. And Ix Chel was not only her companion, she was her most perfect mirror, the one who received her light and transformed it into something new, gentle, accessible to mortals who could not bear the direct intensity of the sun. Without her, his very existence began to lose meaning. Meanwhile, deep in the cenote where she had fallen, Ix Chel lay unconscious, but something extraordinary was happening. Her wounded body was being embraced by the primordial waters, the same waters from which she had been born at the beginning of time. And these waters began to whisper ancient secrets in her ears, secrets even she had never known before. They told her of powers that lay dormant within her, of ways of existing that didn't depend on the approval or light of any other god, of a strength born not of constant brightness, but precisely of the ability to plunge into darkness and be reborn, transformed. The Cenotes waters became a cosmic womb where Ix Chel slowly began to transform, not only healing her wounds, but also discovering aspects of herself that had remained hidden for all the eons she had lived in relation to Itzamna. Deep within, she began to dream of new powers. She dreamed that she could be not just the moon reflecting the sunlight, but the very source of a different light, a silvery light born of herself, dependent on no external source. She dreamed that she could rule not only childbirth, but all kinds of rebirth, not just the fresh waters of rivers, but also the salt waters of distant oceans. She dreamed that she could be not just the companion of a god, but an independent force, complete in herself. And as he dreamed, the seeds of his transformation began to germinate. In the deep silence of the cenote, where not even sound could fully penetrate, Ix Chel began to awaken. But this was no ordinary awakening. It was as if she were being reborn cell by cell, dream by dream, power by power. First, she felt the waters. Not just felt, she understood the waters in a way he had never experienced before. Every drop that touched his wounded skin carried ancient memories. The rain that fell on the first cornfields, the tears shed by all the mothers who had lost children, the sweat of the workers who built the pyramids under the scorching sun, the first drop of water that touched the lips of the first human being. She realized that she was not just the goddess of the waters, Sheer-Wraith waters. Every river, every lake, every drop of rain, every tear shed in the world. And this revelation brought with it a power she had never suspected she possessed. Ix Chel reached out with his consciousness and sensed every cenote on the peninsula, every river that had dried up since his fall, every spring that had been contaminated by the cosmic imbalance. And then, simply, he decided it was time to return. But not like before. When Ix Chel emerged from the cenote, her appearance had completely transformed. She was no longer just the radiant young woman or the wise old woman the Maya knew. Now she was allegious at once. She could appear as a curious girl playing by a stream, as a woman in full maturity, controlling storms with gentle gestures, or as a cosmic ancestor whose eyes contained the wisdom of all the world's oceans. Her skin had acquired a special glow, sometimes silvery like moonlight, sometimes blue like deep water, sometimes translucent like morning mist. In her hair now floated serpents of jellyfish, moving as if swimming in the air, and her hands constantly dripped crystal clear water that, wherever it touched the ground, made flowers bloom like never before. More than her appearance, her essence had changed. The Ix Chel that emerged from the cenote no longer needed Itzamna's light to shine. She had discovered that she carried within her own source of luminosity, a light that neither burned nor blinded, but healed, nourished, and awakened life wherever it touched. When she rose from the cenote into the sky, she did not return to the same place where she had lived alongside Itzamna. Instead, she chose a different region of the celestial vault, a space she herself created, where she could be fully herself, without needing to conform to the expectations or demands of any other god. And from there, he started working. The first thing Ix Chel did was touch all the waters of the Mayan world, not one by one, but all at once, because now she understood that there were no separate waters, only a single cosmic water that took different forms depending on where it manifested. The rivers that had dried up began to flow again, but this time their waters had special properties. Those who drank from them felt a profound renewal, as if something within their chest that had hardened softened again. Pregnant women who bathed in these waters had easier births and healthier babies. Wounded people who bathed in them healed more quickly, not only physically, but also spiritually. Ix Chel had become not only the goddess of the waters, but the goddess of healing through the waters. Then she turned her attention to women. But now her care extended far beyond childbirth. She began visiting in dreams and visions all those who had suffered deep wounds, women betrayed, abandoned, violated, rejected, misunderstood. To each of them, Ix Chel whispered the same message. You don't need anyone's light to shine. You don't need anyone's approval to exist. Just as I was reborn from the depths of my own pain, so can you be reborn from yours. And an extraordinary phenomenon began to unfold. Women who had lost their voices began to sing again. Women who had abandoned their dreams began to weave, paint, and dance with renewed intensity. Women who had hidden from the world began to leave their homes, walking with their heads held high, as if carrying within them a moon of their own illuminating their steps. But Ix Chel didn't stop there. She realized that her transformation had given her the power to govern not only the life that is born, but also the life that is reborn. She became the guardian of all kinds of new beginnings, not just the birth of babies, but the birth of new phases of life, new projects, new versions of ourselves. Farmers who had lost their crops began planting again with a mysterious confidence, as if they knew the earth would respond differently this time. Artists whose inspiration had dried up woke in the middle of the night with visions so vivid they had to rush to create, as if Ix Chel were pouring colors directly into their minds. Young people who had given up on love found themselves able to open their hearts again, protected by a new wisdom about how to love without losing oneself. The new Ix Chel had discovered that true power wasn't in never falling. It was in knowing how to rise from each fall stronger and wiser than before. And then, one particularly clear night, when her new silver light bathed all the Mayan temples simultaneously, she did something no god had ever done before. She looked directly at Itzamna, who shone alone in her region of the sky, and smiled. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness. It was a smile of understanding, because now she knew a truth that can only be learned in the depths. That sometimes we need to be hurt by those we love, to discover strengths we didn't even know we had. Ix Chel's smile crossed the heavens like a wave of silver light, and Itzamna, for the first time since he had wounded his mate, felt something beyond the guilt that consumed him. He felt awe, recognition, and a whole new kind of wonder. The Ix Chel who now shone before him was not the same goddess he had known for millennia. This new version of her radiated a strength that asked no permission, a wisdom that needed no validation, a light that depended on no reflection. It was as if she had found, in the depths of her own fall, a treasure he had never known existed, and it was at that moment that Itzamna understood the greatest lesson of her entire divine existence, that true love is not about possession, control, or molding another person into our image. True love is about admiring the strength that arises when one finds oneself completely. Ix Chel, he said, and his sunny voice sounded different, more humble, more respectful. What you have become is more magnificent than anything I could have imagined. I became who I always was, she replied, her voice echoing like the sound of waves meeting sand for the first time. I just had to dive to the bottom of my own ocean to remember. From that night on, the Mayan sky took on a new dynamic. Itzamna remained the powerful sun, lord of order and wisdom, but now he had learned to dance with Ix Chel rather than trying to direct her. He shone during the day, spreading light and warmth over the world, and when it was his time to rest, it was no longer with the arrogance of someone who believes himself indispensable. Ix Chel emerged into the night with her own silvery light, no longer reflecting his own, but offering the world a different kind of luminosity, a light that did not burn the eyes, that allowed one to see nuances and shadows, that revealed beauties that daylight, however generous, could not show. And the Maya, observing this new celestial dance, understood something profound about their own relationships, their own lives, their own growth processes. They saw that Ix Chel had become more powerful precisely because she had traversed her own darkness, that her fall had not been an end, but a gestation, that the silence in which she had plunged into the depths of the cenote had not been death, but rebirth. Mayan women began to tell the story of Ix Chel from mother to daughter, from grandmother to granddaughter, whispering in each other's ears that not all falls are losses. Sometimes, falling is the only way to discover that we can fly. Men also learned from Itzamna that true strength lies not in control, but in admiration. That love is not about making the other small so they fit into our worldview, but about growing so we can see the greatness they hold. And so, the legend of Ix Chel spread throughout the Mayan civilization, passing from city to city, from temple to temple, recorded in codices that spanned centuries, painted on murals that still adorn ruins lost in the jungle. She became the patron saint of all who ever felt that life had wounded them beyond repair, the protector of all who ever felt their light had been extinguished forever, the guardian of all who discovered, at the bottom of their own well, seeds of a strength they didn't even know they possessed. Mayan priests created special rituals to honor Ix Chel's transformation. On new moon nights, when she could not be seen in the sky, they remembered that her absence did not mean weakness. It meant she was working in the unseen depths of reality, preparing healing waters, weaving dreams of renewal, whispering courage into the ears of those who needed it most. And on nights of the full moon, when its silvery light bathed the entire Yucatán peninsula, they celebrated not only its brilliance, but above all its journey, because Ix Chel had taught them that the most beautiful light is not the one that never fades, it is the one that learns to be reborn. The offerings they brought to her changed as well. In addition to white flowers and wild honey, they began bringing small mirrors of polished obsidian, symbolizing the ability to look within. They brought seeds germinating in clay pots, representing life born from the darkness. And they brought water collected from deep cenotes, honoring the power that had been born in the depths. Over time, the story of Ix Chel transcended even the boundaries of Mayan civilization. Travelers from other lands heard of the goddess who had fallen from the sky and been reborn more powerful, and they brought this story back to their own peoples, where it blended with other legends, taking on new colors, but always retaining its core essence, because the truth Ix Chel embodies is universal. All of us, at some point in our lives, will be hurt by something or someone we considered a source of light. We will all, at some point, fall into our own cenotes of darkness and silence. And all of us, if we have the courage to dive deep instead of fighting the fall, will discover that we carry within us our own light, our own strength, a capacity for rebirth that is independent of any external source. The legend ends with Ix Chel and Itzamna dancing in the heavens, but not as before. Now they dance as equals, each shining with their own light, each respecting the other's cycles and rhythms, each knowing that true love is one that celebrates independence rather than fears it. And the elders say that on the clearest nights, when the moon is particularly bright, and the waters of the cenotes reflect the stars like mirrors of liquid silver, it is still possible to hear the voice of Ix Chel, whispering to all those who are going through moments of darkness, "Don't be afraid of the bottom of the well. That's where you'll find the source." And just as Ix Chel discovered her own source of light at the bottom of the cenote, perhaps you too are ready to discover yours. If the story of the Mayan goddess touched something deep within you, there's a practical path to transforming that inspiration into real movement. The book, The Forgotten Agreement, the 30-day challenge, was created precisely for moments like these, when you feel a dormant force within you, waiting to be awakened. These daily exercises serve as small dives into your own inner cenote, helping you find your own light. The link is in the description. But now let me ask you a question that cannot be avoided. How many times have you confused your break with your end? Because the legend of Ix Chel isn't just about a Mayan goddess who lived 1,000 years ago. It's about you. It's about me. It's about all of us who at some point in our lives find ourselves at the bottom of our own cenote, thinking our light has gone out forever. There are times when life seems to lose its rhythm. Days when the body awakens, but the soul remains asleep. At these times, even small gestures, getting out of bed, opening the window, taking a deep breath, feel too heavy. It's as if the world demands movement, but within us there's only silence and an invisible weight. This is the territory of demotivation, when the will is hidden and everything seems suspended in time. But the ancient Mayans knew that nothing in life is static. They looked to Ix Chel and saw, in the moon's dance, the reflection of the human heart itself. The moon is not full every day. It waxes, wanes, disappears, and returns. So are we, made of phases, of comings and goings, of presences and absences of brightness. And maybe that's exactly what you need to hear today. You were not born to shine without pause. You were born to live in cycles of light and shadow, of silence and movement, of fall and rebirth. The truth is that no human being can live in constant fulfillment. No one shines without pause. No one blossoms without winter. No one advances without also pausing in moments of shadow. And the problem isn't darkness itself. The problem is when we forget that darkness is also part of the dance. It is in this forgetfulness that demotivation becomes a prison instead of a passage. Ix Chel didn't deny her fall. She embraced the plunge, traversed the silence, rebuilt herself in the invisible, and returned even greater. And here's the point the Mayans understood so well. When you insist on fighting the void, it weighs more heavily. But when you recognize it as part of the cycle, it transforms into a hidden force, preparing for the return. What if your lack of motivation wasn't a mistake, nor a failure of yours? What if, like Ix Chel, This emptiness was simply a call to a transformation that has yet to unfold. Perhaps what you call a lack of energy is actually a silent invitation to abandon old ways. Let go of what no longer serves you and allow something new to blossom within you. The Mayans looked at the moon and knew, when it disappears, it's not dead. It's just preparing to return with another glow. And this wisdom raises an inevitable question. How many times have you confused pause with failure? How many times have you believed that your starless night was the end, when in fact it was just the gestation time for the next dawn? Ix Chel shows us that lack of motivation can be a message, a sign that it's time to retreat, look within one's own cycle, and decide how to be reborn. It's not about waiting for willpower to fall from the sky like a gift. It's about becoming an accomplice to this process, accepting the rhythm of life and choosing which light you want to carry when the dark phase ends. And here is the provocation that the goddess lets echo. If even the moon, with all its grandeur, agrees to disappear in order to return, why do you insist on believing that you need to shine all the time? Ix Chel's silence wasn't defeat, it was transition. And perhaps the same is happening to you now. This lack of motivation that seems to paralyze you may just be the gap between what no longer makes sense and what has yet to be born. But there's an important detail. When the goddess returned, she didn't return the same. She was reborn greater, multiplied, with new gifts, new powers, new ways of touching life. With each cycle, Ix Chel left something behind, and precisely because of this, she had space to carry the new. And here's the question that can't be avoided. What within you needs to be left behind so that your strength can be reborn? What burdens do you still carry that prevent you from renewing yourself? Lack of motivation isn't an absence of life. It's too much of the past taking up space for the future. Perhaps this is the time to do the same as the goddess. Accept that not everything needs to remain, that even darkness has a purpose, and that true power lies in choosing what remains and what can finally go. The Mayans knew no one controls the moon. It disappears when needed, returns when ready, and never asks permission to follow its cycle. And maybe that's exactly what you're missing right now. Stop asking permission to start over. How many times have you postponed your life, waiting for the right time? How many times have you believed you needed more strength, more courage, more guarantees while your own light was already asking for passage? Ix Chel's provocation is clear. No one will give you back your motivation. No one can light the fire for you. It's up to you to decide whether you'll stay hidden in the cave or whether you'll come out to light up the sky again. Lack of motivation doesn't have to be a sentence. It can be the womb of your next self. And when you truly choose to let go of the past, you'll see that you're no longer the same person who entered this silence. Because the break didn't break you, it remade you. And if the moon, with all its grandeur, accepts to fade away in order to return, what exactly is stopping you from being reborn? In the end, the legend of Ix Chel isn't just about a Mayan goddess. It's about us, about the courage to accept that we weren't born to shine without pause, but to live in cycles of light and shadow, of silence and movement, of fall and rebirth. The provocation that remains is simple but difficult to ignore. If even gods need to disappear to find themselves again, what makes you believe that you should blame yourself for not being motivated all the time? The question is not, when will the desire return? The question is, what are you going to do with the space that demotivation has opened up in you? Maybe this emptiness is a chance to rebuild yourself. Maybe this pause is preparation for a return that will surprise even you. And when your light is reborn, remember Ix Chel. She didn't return the same. She returned greater. And you can too. If this story resonated with you, remember to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and continue receiving stories that transcend time and touch what still pulses within you. With each legend, a new way of looking at life. With each cycle, a new opportunity for rebirth.